I was headed to where I am now, which is Charlotte, in the airport last night, and sitting with producer Cole, wasting away the time because our flight kept being delayed. Ugh, it's the worst. But what was making it less unbearable, more bearable, was that Pete Buttigieg at this exact time was appearing on CNN, and I have the clips that we were watching as it was being broadcasted, where Pete Buttigieg just is so good at the talking, you know? It just really is compelling. And here he explains why Trump should and is scared to debate Kamala Harris. We've been seeing Trump posting things about how actually if we do this next debate, it can't be on ABC News, and just setting up an explanation as to why maybe he would back out of it. Why? Because he's scared. And Pete Buttigieg hits him where it hurts on that one. Then we'll get to a different moment as well. But here it is on Kaitlan Collins' show, The Source.
Well, and Donald Trump said today that he does want to debate Vice President Harris, maybe more so than once. One of the issues that
only after backing out of the debate he already agreed to, though, right? Somehow
today he has an issue with doing it with ABC.
Right, but he didn't when he agreed to it in the first place, right? I mean, I think the interesting thing about this is what changed from when he said he was ready to do an ABC debate and when he now says he's not. ABC didn't change. Donald Trump didn't change. But there's a new candidate, and clearly he hesitates to debate her on the exact same terms that he thought
so you think
would
he's
be okay.
Scared to debate her?
Yeah.
Why do you think so?
Because I think she is going to be so effective, and she's going to lay bare his inability to talk about anything but himself and his past. I think what you'll see is two things that I'm excited for Americans to see. Yes, the contrast, the way, as she laid out very powerfully, she, as a prosecutor who has defended people from people like Donald Trump, is going to remind everybody about that record, but also a contrast in governing records. She's going to be, I think, very effective in reminding Americans that on issue after issue, they already agree with us. They already agree with her and Democrats. Americans agree with Democrats and disagree with Donald Trump on taxes and his agenda of tax cuts for the rich. They agree with Kamala Harris, Democrats, and disagree with Donald Trump on his removal of the right to choose in this country. And gun violence, marriage, you can go on down the list. I think she's very well positioned to remind Americans of that fact.
Well, and Trump.
And there's a broader point here, too, before getting to this second clip. To me, what's really exciting is knowing how much work we have ahead of us, but how much we're going to see returns on that work. Meaning, it felt like for some time, the race between Biden and Trump had become very stagnant, where it was still as important as ever. Thus, the work was so necessary. But people had their feelings about either individual, and it was looking like a really difficult race. And now, running on the record of the Biden-Harris administration, so all those conversations we were having before still are paying dividends and informing people about the policy record. But now there's also this new person that people know, but they don't know well enough, who we introduce Americans to, that represents an agenda and can communicate that agenda more effectively, that people support. So we're not having to convince people, to Pete Buttigieg's point, we're not having to convince people of a new set of beliefs or to support something they probably don't support. When Kamala Harris is talking about reproductive freedom, protecting democracy, expanding access to affordable health care, addressing maternal mortality, paid family leave, etc. These are things that you don't have to go to someone and say, this is why you should believe these policies are good. You just explain what the policy positions are, and Americans support them. Our issue before was that people were being prevented from having that discussion because of media narratives and real underlying concerns about the candidacy of Biden and Trump's ability to pull away the discussion from policy with a lot of distractions. And so if what we do in the next few months is let Kamala Harris do her thing, her last rallies have shown a really good ability to compel people, motivate people. Hopefully the same thing will happen in prominent interviews. And then definitely the same thing, I'm confident, would happen in the debate where she'll mop the floor with Trump. But our job is just informing people. That was the job before, but I think it's even more doable and easy now about what the positions are. Because unless we were in a situation where I would really have to rethink my perception of America, I think I can operate under the assumption that the majority of Americans, if they understand the stakes, would vote the correct way if they understood democracy is hanging in the balance. The implications of a second Trump term, the details of Project 2025, the contrast between the two policy visions, serious governance versus an abandonment of such governance, a dedication to democracy, abandonment of democratic principles. Someone who has spent their life upholding and serving in the interest of the Constitution, and someone who quite literally called for the termination of the Constitution. And we break that down for people. We don't have to change their values, go in there and convince them to have a different moral framework for people to understand why Kamala Harris is their candidate over Donald Trump. That's what I think is so exciting about now having a much more effective messenger, because we can believe more in her ability to go out there and make that case, because Biden was doing the job, was governing effectively, being present so well. But as we talked about, especially post-debate, the issues were in the candidacy, the PR, but PR matters. Perception is reality in politics, baby. And so now with less concerns about the candidacy side of things, even though it's still a big thing, the individual, the personality, we can trust her to go do her thing on that, then our job becomes even more simple and clear. Would you do me a favor? If you're not already, can you click that subscribe button? It makes a huge difference. It's easy, free, but I appreciate it greatly. Back to the video. Here is more from this interview, and this is on JD Vance.
Do you think that there's someone she could pick as her vice president that would make him regret that choice?
Well, again, that's going to be her call, her process. But what I will say is that the choice of JD Vance is a regrettable choice, because he's somebody who was at his most convincing and effective when he talked about how unfit for office Donald Trump is. And he has not explained any reason, other than, of course, his obvious interest in power, why he would have changed his mind on that. Remember, JD Vance's whole identity is that he is connected to Appalachia, a place that is being hurt so profoundly by the opioid crisis. So the fact that he didn't just refer to Donald Trump as an idiot, though he didn't just say all kinds of things about how he was terrible, but compared Donald Trump to opioids, that is literally the darkest, most negative thing someone connected to Appalachia could possibly say about a politician. And that was in public, right? In private, he was comparing him to Hitler, reportedly. He has yet to explain why his opinion would be any different other than his own search for power.
So when
Lots of people, the people are saying that Buttigieg should be Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate. If I had to guess, I have other people who I think for strategic reasons Kamala Harris will end up picking, but I'd love to see Buttigieg on a debate stage with Vance for a vice presidential debate. Stop. It's brutal. Vance might just have to drop off the ticket right there. And I say that because what he's identifying is such a fundamental characteristic of a lot of these prominent MAGA Trump supporters. Not the people on the ground. They authentically like Trump. I can tell you that for certain. Right now I'm sitting close to the rally we're about to go to and talk to more Trump supporters. They buy into it. But the leaders, many of them don't. I think you have different categories. Your Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, actually is crazy, does buy into this stuff. And then you have the hunger for power that drives the other category of people to pretend like they think Trump is reasonable, pretend like they stand for these things. And in leaked text messages, as we discussed in a different segment, JD Vance admitted as much. He essentially said, what would my constituency be if I were to run for Senate as a populist but anti-Trump Republican? Not a super establishment, but anti-Trump. Where would I have voters? And guess what? Between the time that text was sent and his run for Senate, he became pro-Trump. Oh my gosh. What? It was authentic. It was a real come to Jesus moment, come to orange Jesus moment that he had between that time. No, of course not. And so we've talked about before how it's weird that MAGA folks can support Trump despite so many of his former top officials not supporting him, despite his wife not really supporting him in public often. It's a similar thing here. Why do you support someone who is surrounded by people who tell you they support him, but have spent much of their life explaining why they actually don't, and they're just doing this because they want to make fools of you? The people being insulted the most by the fraudulent behavior of people like J.D. Vance, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, gosh, are their own voters. They think that you're not whatever enough, fill in the blank, to think your way into understanding them as frauds and to place principle over power. But it seems like, whether conscious or not, members of even the MAGA movement, your rank and file folks, understand that power should go above those principles, and thus they'll just support anyone who will help their way to power. And that is really sad to see. And I hope we don't just let go of the discussion of J.D. Vance's past statements, because I actually understand in other presidential campaigns when someone picks a VP, like Kamala Harris being picked by Biden. Kamala Harris had some major criticisms for Biden, called him out on stage, on the debate stage, for his past positions. And those things should be reassessed when someone's selected to then be on the ticket with the person they criticized. But those things also aren't fundamental character and principle assessments, I guess. Those things aren't the type of criticism that you can't get over. Whereas it's strange as an adult that you could go from thinking someone might be America's Hitler and comparing them to opioids and go all the way to they're one of the greatest presidents of our time. That means either you have really flimsy political principles, your political ideology was always built on a really loose, floppy foundation, and we should question that, or you're a grifter. You're lying. You're defrauding the American people with this act you're putting on for power. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments. If you want to get extra content daily, you can do so by clicking the join button below.